That's all.
Right.
And use it
Yeah,
in a
but
way
you
that benefits people. Hey, everybody. Hey,
right.
hey, hey. Can you turn the radio down just a bit, Paul? Thank you
Have
so
a good
much.
show.
Hey, you guys. Can you all hear? Chapearl, can you hear us on Facebook? Chapearl? Okay. Paul, can you hear us
I
on
think she.
Facebook? Paul? Is anybody there?
I've got Reverend Johnson on the line now.
Okay. Can you hear us on Facebook?
One moment.
Okay. Thank you. Hey, hey,
Okay.
hey. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marnie. Reverend Johnson, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you,
I'm
dear?
doing well.
Hello.
Doing well. Thank you. Hey, okay. So can you hear
Speak,
us?
Maria. Good morning. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. So everybody, we're good?
I've got Reverend Johnson on the line now.
Reverend Johnson, can you speak, please? Yes. Good morning. God bless you. Good morning.
Reverend Johnson, how you doing?
Yeah, I can hear her.
Okay, you
I'm
can?
doing good. I can hear. I'm
Okay,
good.
perfect.
Yes. If she could speak up a little bit,
Okay.
okay?
Reverend Johnson,
But we can hear. Yes.
need you to project just a little bit more. Okay?
I can. Of course, you know I can do that.
Now this I'm telling you, that's why I said project. I didn't say speak louder.
Have a great show.
Thank you so much. I
You're
defaulted
welcome.
to your music background.
That's right. That's right.
And
We know how to project.
that's right. And my eyes got big. How about that? So hey everybody, that's right. You know when the choir master would look at you or your voice teacher would say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" We went over
Right.
this. Let me say hello
Right.
to Nicole Barrett, Brian Martin. How you doing? It's Hump Day. That's right, Barbara Jean Jarvis. How you doing, Samantha? Uh, is it from? Is it Carissa? I know I asked you this last week from Minnesota. How you doing, sweetie? Where are you in Minnesota? You know we're going to have a ball. AM 950 radio. It's going to be big fun. Oh, yes, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. And you've got to attend. I'm going to get dressed up, even though it will be virtual. And Brian Martin and Brian House, how you doing? Daryl Prunty, how you doing? And please, everybody, join Brian Martin over on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show. I just need you to like and subscribe. I really need you all to help us to get those numbers up over there. There you go. So I pray that everyone is well. Still doing just a couple more things before we come up, but we're going to have a good day. We're talking about, of course, the George Floyd case in the second hour. Um, all of the jurors have been impaneled. What is that going to look like? Who's on the jury, and what can you expect? Particularly in the context of this $27 million settlement that his family received. How's all that going to work, or will that have an impact on that at all? And we're going to talk about student loan debt cancellation. I mean, like for everybody, whatever your debt load is, what would that look like? What would that look like? The Center for Responsible Lending and other advocates are still pushing for that. They're saying that no student in the United States should have any student loan debt, period. What would that look like? And then, there are different studies that show Pastor Vicki Johnson, who's going to be giving us the good news in a hot second. And of course, Dr. Deborah Holden will be giving us the latest on COVID-19. Um, there are studies that show that black
1 minute.
patients are not given pain medication with as much frequency. And so black patients suffer more. So, and it happens with children. When children have had appendicitis, a little more than 10% of black children get pain meds. No, excuse me, a little more than 10% of black children get pain meds. More than a third of white children do, Vicki. Can you believe that? So our children are writhing in pain. It's awful. It's awful. And so,
30.
it's like, forget about Tuskegee. There are things that black people are
Hmm.
experiencing right now, brown people are experiencing right now that make them look at the medical establishment and say, are you serious?
15.
Let's just keep it 100 now. That's the only way we're going to get through this.
10.
So I'm glad to be with you all here today.
5.
Trying to tell some truth here.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Wednesday, hump day, everybody, March 24th, 2021. It's a joy to be with you today. We're in springtime, everybody. It's a beautiful day in Chicago. WCPT 820. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and AM 950 radio. My family up to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to call me or text me at 773 763 WCPT 773 763 9278 773 763 9278. I want to hear your voices today. And if you text us, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. So give them a shout out as well. Hey, everybody, let's talk about the George Floyd case. All the jurors have been impaneled, and if you can believe it, it's almost been a year. Now we're going to hear the opening arguments for Derek Chauvin's trial. The officer whose knee was on the neck of George Floyd, the officer who has been charged with his murder. But will he serve any time? Will he pay the price? Got to talk about that. We're going to talk about the jurors. And then going to talk about student loan debt cancellation. So many people have student loan debt. It's $1 trillion problem, and it's keeping people from getting married, from buying homes, from really living their lives. What would it mean to cancel the student loans and student loan debt for everybody? I mean, just what would that mean? What would that make? How transformative would that be for the United States? I want you to talk about that with Attorney Ashley Harrington from the Centers for Responsible Lending. And of course, we're going to be talking about something that I heard, a story that I was reading, and a story that I heard, quite frankly, on NPR. And they were saying, forget about Tuskegee. Let's look at the racism faced by the Black and brown communities that make them push back against the medical establishment, not just with respect to the COVID-19 vaccine, but Black and brown people have a story right now. Right now, Black people are given pain management medicines far fewer times than white patients. I mean, we suffer, and we saw this with this Black physician, and we're going to talk about all of that. She detailed the horrible treatment that she received in the hospital while she was battling COVID-19, and she died. And she died. So we're going to talk about that, and of course, get some good news from Pastor Vicki Johnson. So let's get to some of these headlines today so we can get on with the show. Chicago, a high of 57 degrees, mostly cloudy today. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 43 degrees and some rain. The Dow closed down 308 points. Yesterday, the Nasdaq closed down 149 points, and the S&P 500 flatline. Did move up, did move down, 0. The gun debate is front and center after these shootings in Boulder, Colorado. Now we know the identities of those who were killed. We know more about the suspect, 21-year-old Ahmad Alisa, and he was taken into custody after the shooting and faces 10 counts of murder. What we don't know now is any concrete murder. So in the meantime, President Biden is calling on Congress to pass an assault weapons ban. What do you think about that? He said, quote, I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future, and I want to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. We can ban assault weapons in high capacity magazines in this country once again. I got that done when I was a senator, and we should do it again. What do you think about that? Will that happen? Call me, text me, 773-763-WCPT, or you can meet my morning stars here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. And hey, meet me on Twitter at Santita J or at the Santita J Show. Or please like and subscribe on my new YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel, everybody. On day 12, the 15th and final juror was chosen for the Derek Chauvin murder trial. Of course, he has been accused of killing George Floyd. Now the proceedings have been recessed until the attorney's opening arguments, which will be scheduled for Monday. Who is in that juror pool? Well, we're going to look at that with attorney C.K. Hoffler and Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire. at the top of the next hour. Cannot wait to hear what their thoughts are. WHO, the World Health Organization, their chief is blasting grotesque vaccine inequality. They said that if vaccines are not distributed equally among rich and poor nations, we will see death on a scale that we cannot even imagine. In fact, he says it will be grotesque. He said in January, I said that the world was on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure unless urgent steps were taken to ensure equitable distribution of the vaccines. He said that the inequitable distribution of vaccines is not just a moral outrage, it's also economically and epidemiologically self defeating, everybody. Um, it's amazing how few vaccines have gone to the poorest nations in the world. Uh, for example, in Africa, uh, 17% of the world's population, they have 2% of the vaccines. Whereas in Canada, they have enough vaccines to inoculate every Canadian twice. So we're going to talk about that too. Of course, nurses, teachers, and experts are pushing back against the rush to reopen schools as COVID-19 cases spike. The nation's two largest teachers' unions and the National Nurses United Union, the largest union for the profession in the country, have put out a statement raising concerns about the CDC's guidance based on studies that fail to account for several critical factors, including no differentiation between facilities, ventilation levels, self reporting of infection data, and on and on and on. Democracy for DC, it seems like it's closer than ever. It seems that DC, Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, a city of more than 700,000 residents, might be on the verge of statehood. Now, they have a representative in Congress, much like the United States Virgin Islands and Guam and Puerto Rico, our colonies, and they're not able to vote. They can observe, they can participate, they're paid, they have staffs, but guess what? They cannot vote. There are more people in Washington than there are in Vermont, for example. What do you think about that? Should DC have statehood? We're going to talk about that before the week is out because I think that they should. There's a corporate coalition that is calling on Congress to approve paid family leave. Paid family leave. What do you think about that, everybody? Should we now have paid family leave and on the eve of equal pay day? It, there's a report. There's a report that reveals that people who make sub-minimum wage are often on the other side of a lot of harassment. This is from the One Fair Wage Group. 70% of the women in the restaurant industry, for example, have been sexually harassed while at work. And a year into this pandemic here in Illinois, prisons still have no plan. Reverend Vicki Johnson, Pastor Vicki Johnson, for in-person visits. As we get into the good news, the pastor of the St. Thomas Lutheran Church, no in-person visits for people in these prisons in the midst of this pandemic. Oh, that seems awfully cruel, Pastor Johnson. So cruel.
Yes, indeed it is. It's inhumane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You mean to tell me if people have been locked away, they can't see their loved ones, their wives, their husbands, their children, the people who just want to let them know that, hey, we're on the outside, we're still thinking of you, we're still loving you. Well, you know what? On the back of that news, give us some good news. What should we be thinking about today?
All right. Well, good morning, and it's so good to be here on Hump Day
Whew, yes.
to get through the rest of the week. We are in the Lenten season, and usually for Lent, we give up something that we really like. Something, like meat, sweets, soda pop, smoking, bad habits. We give up television programs that we really enjoy. And as of late, people are giving up social media for Lent. We give up these things so that we can discipline ourselves to become closer to God. But this year for Lent was different. I decided that I could not give up anything else because the pandemic has already taken so much away from me. It has taken friends, and family. It has taken away the ability to grieve in community with family. It has taken away our ability to visit those that are what we call in church the sick and shut in list, those who are in prison. It has taken so much away from us. It has taken away the common things like being able to go in the grocery store and just browse around or stroll through the shopping mall. And most importantly for me, it took away my in person worship, the hallelujahs and the amen. I have been stripped bare and have nothing more to give up. So this year for Lent, we decided to see how we could feel ourselves for fruitful living. Romans, the 12th chapter and the second verse says, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you might prove what is that good and perfect and acceptable will of God." So instead of giving up, I am transforming so I can do the acceptable will of God. I challenge you to do the same thing, to be transformed so that as we come out of this Lenten season, we can come out new, ready for the next season of life, the next season that still has challenges for us, but we will be renewed so that we can do the work that God has called us to do. Are you willing to be renewed today? Are you willing to be transformed? Stop languishing in what we have missed and begin to look forward to those things that are ahead. If you are willing to do that with me, then to me, that's good news.
Amen. I love that. Thank you. That's a completely different take on this because we have been stripped of
Yes.
so much. And thank you so much. Because really, by being transformed, you're giving back to God. Yes?
Yes,
Wow.
definitely.
By
Yeah,
the, by the
that's what
renewing
we
of your
need
mind.
to do.
I need that. Thank you. I need renewal today. Pastor Vicki Johnson. One of these days, we're going to get you on here to sing. How about that? St. Thomas Lutheran Church. What you say? Oh, no.
Only if you sing with me.
I will do it.
Only if you sing with
I will do it. I'll take you take the high part. I'll take the low. I'm a mezzo,
me. Amen.
not a coloratura. So there you go. Much love to Pastor Vicki Johnson, St. Thomas Lutheran Church, one of our brilliant pastors and one of the great psalmists, one of the great singers of our time. And we've got Dr. Deborah Holden, world-renowned epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Michigan's Public Health at Michigan State University. We're going to be having a talk at the bottom of the hour with Dr. Ivan Walks, former D.C. Public Health Commissioner, about putting Tuskegee in its proper context. I mean, racism is impacting Black people and Brown people in America and in the world with the medical establishment today. But first, let's get our latest on COVID-19. It's wonderful hearing your voice this morning. What's going on with COVID-19? You know, we just got a warning in Chicago from our public health commissioner that these young adults are driving an uptick in COVID-19 cases, and they were expecting that out of, with this spring break fever. And we've been locked away for a year. Dr. Deborah Holden, what are we to make of all of this?
Well, it's going in the wrong direction. I just got the data for my own county yesterday. We're going on week number 55 of our community coded webinar. 55. Could have never told me 55 weeks ago we'd be doing this for this long, but here we are. So our community case rate is now at 9%. 4 weeks ago, it was 2.9%. We were doing so great, and now this week it's at 9%.
How did that happen?
School. So a couple things happened, and again, none of this is a surprise. I was hopeful, and I don't really, that whole space of being hopeful, wishful, that doesn't really jive for a scientist. You know, there's something a little bit more linear about my thinking than you can get from being hopeful and wishful. You know, when there are things that we can control that follow a particular pattern, my thing is do the right thing, and then you don't have to have your fingers crossed or, you know, um, be looking for good fortune or good luck. Just do the right thing, right? It's like you touch the stove, your hand gets burned, you reopen, the rates go up. And this is exactly what's happened. So we've got a lot of parents who pushed for sports, right? And again, I'm not pretending this stuff doesn't have an impact. A lot of people have pushed for sports. So a lot of the high school students have started re-engaging in sports. And then some of the schools started to reopen. And then the city itself just reopened. So on February 1st, restaurants came back online, and gyms and bowling, all these other places. And I'm telling you, I went to one place to pick up food. It looked like it was beyond capacity for even, non-COVID capacity. I turned my tail right around. I said, y'all keep that food and everything in there. I don't want nothing out of this place. I'm not even kidding you. So, yeah, people are, over it. They're trying to get back to normal. And that push has created this problem. What's so crazy is 25% of my county. This was as of yesterday. And we're like going gangbusters on vaccinating people. More than a little over 25% of my county has received at least their first dose of vaccine. So, everybody had this myth. Oh, once we get the vaccine, this silly guy from Hopkins says, oh, we'll be at herd immunity by April. With the people who have been vaccinated and the people who have natural immunity, and none of that has turned out to be true. So the key is people just have to stay the course. They just have to stay the course. And I keep saying it, and I feel like a broken record. But if we don't get the community case rate down, and when I say down, it needs to be somewhere on the order of 1-2%. Until we get there, in the absence of herd immunity, in the absence of mass vaccination, in the absence of, some sort of miracle, we're just going to be stuck in this. So, people going to spring break, people doing what they want to do, all of that is just fueling the problem.
Well, then, because we're looking at Germany, I mean, Angela Merkel is looking at locking down supermarkets, and which is like stunning. It's like, how would people get food? Which I think would fuel um, a lot more pain, and a lot, and when you start locking people in, you make people fearful, right? I mean, I think there's a lot to this. And I mean, and now we're beginning to hear warnings from all over the United States that we're seeing spikes. Um, Sit down, just in a couple of minutes. Tell us what individually, and within our homes, and then it will spread to the communities. Hopefully, what should we be doing?
This feels like deja vu.
But you know what? I tell you why. It's not like a broken record, because the stories continue to evolve, right?
Sure.
With with the vaccine, the question has been, in a lot of circles, is this a vaccine? Because I got vaccinated for mumps, measles, rubella, polio, and the guarantee was that you were not going to get it. That's not the guarantee with this. And the guarantee was that you were not going to be able to spread it. That's not the guarantee with this. You're still told that even when you've been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, that you should You still have to mask up, be physically distant, and all of that. There's a lot that's coming at us, a lot that's coming at us, and then other people are saying that you know what, the mortality rate for COVID-19 is not as great as it is for other diseases. So I'm going to take my chances. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that these are the thoughts that are out here because as I travel, and I haven't left town, but as I move around, I see people who are unmasked. Not if you're in a restaurant or in a store, but folks are walking around, Dr. Deborah Holden, unmasked. And people will get into fights with you if you ask them to wear a mask. So there's a lot going on here. Just tell us in these couple of minutes before we go to break, what should we be doing?
Yeah, and so I want to just be clear. I think we have some myths about how some of the vaccines we've had in the past, how effective they were and how well they worked, right?
Yeah.
So vaccines, most of them do not provide 100% protection. And as a matter of fact, some of the older vaccines, the kinds that we took when we were children, had many, many more side effects, many more side effects, and did not provide 100% protection from both disease or from contracting a virus or from getting ill from that virus. And so it's just we have a lot more knowledge and information now. You know, everybody's a mini immunologist these days
Yeah.
because we've learned so much about vaccines and what they are and are not and how they work. And, you know, people understand the difference now between, and we already saw this with HIV and AIDS, but people now understand the difference between a virus and a disease, right?
1 minute.
SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. You know, so we've all learned a lot. I do think it can be a bit overwhelming. And I heard Sister Johnson talk about, you know, Lent coming up. And I really would encourage people to give up something that even if it looks like it's good, may actually be a burden for you right now. And it could be social media. It could be the news. It could be something. Because we're getting a lot
30.
coming at us. But if I tell people just these basic things,
Well, you know, I gotta go to
this
break
is
now. We're gonna get it on the other side.
okay.
We're gonna get it on this side
Sure.
very quickly as we bring up Dr. Walks as we talk about uh, the
Over
racism
15.
in the medical community that Black and brown people in particular deal with every day,
10.
being denied pain meds, children and adults. Gotta talk
That's
about it.
5.
The Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a few minutes. Yeah, you know, I'm gonna send you something that I want to talk with you about in the next few days when you know, if you chase it up the tree. But we're going to bring on Dr. Walks and go right into this. I heard this report on NPR, Dr. Holden, and it was, you know, the headline, you know, grabbed you. Forget about Tuskegee, not forget about it, but there is a reason, and they talk to people um, in real time. I mean, today about their experiences in the healthcare system, and I was so relieved. Um, you know, it took me back to I remember when my brother Jonathan, who was accident prone, Deborah, and Mrs. Lewis, our next door neighbor, Mrs. Ramsey Lewis, bless her heart, she had taken her daughter Dawn and I, who were best friends, and they were next door neighbors. We turned down the street, and we saw this, you know, this police
We have Dr.
car.
Walks now.
And hey, Dr. Walks, how you doing? I'm about to bring up another one of my
I'm
stories.
doing well.
Got Dr. Deborah Furholden.
Good morning. Go ahead.
And
Good morning, Dr. Deborah.
I saw this.
Good morning, Dr. Walks. Good morning.
There was this police car, and I said, "Oh my gosh!" It looked like it was far down the street. So I said, "Oh my goodness! I hope nothing has happened at my home." Now I was only about 8, 9, but you know, because we lived with so many death threats and whatnot, and security, it was like, oh, I got very anxious. And when we pulled up as we got near to our home, I saw my brother was stretched out on the grass, which I couldn't even see the car. I jumped out. Well, he had actually walked across the street, and a driver had accidentally hit him. So they took him to the emergency room, but he was okay. His foot was messed up a little bit, but it was still like he was conscious and he was talking, and so that was a relief. But still, you don't know. But he waited in that emergency room for hours. Jonathan must have been about 6 at the time. He waited in the emergency room for hours, 4, 5, 6 hours. And my parents flew back into town that night because, of course, when they heard that, my mother flew into town like immediately, and my father preached that afternoon and flew right back in. And my father went to that hospital, and whew, he was furious and let them know it. And it was in Jet magazine the next week. But he said, this, I remember him saying, even then, he said, this happens to black people, and he used that as a teachable moment for us. He said, this is what black people deal with every day. This is why daddy is fighting. I'll never forget that. Ever. They would take things like that. They would take these instances, and our parents would say, this is what we go through. This is why we're fighting. He said, because they should not have let my baby sit there
1 minute.
and suffer. Oh, whew. I mean, I think it even made the papers here too, because he was. I mean, he didn't go in there tearing up things, but he said, this is a child. And he was hit by a car, and you let him sit. We knew the emergency room was full. It's a child. What? So it's a lot. No, it's a lot. So that's part of the thing. Let's stop blaming Tuskegee and let's look at what's really happening here. It's a whole lot. So, but I'm going to bring you up very quickly. You can give us an elevator pitch on what we need to do, Dr. Deborah Furhold, and then we're going to go right into this topic. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you.
10. 5. This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Hump Day, Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. It's a beautiful day. It's going to be cloudy in Chicago, 57 degrees, WCPT 8, WCPT 820 AM, and then AM 950 radio. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 43 degrees and rain, but it's still a beautiful day, everybody. Remember, the sun is still shining. Rain might be in front of it, clouds too. But remember, the sun is shining everywhere you go. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. My family in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in Wisconsin, and in Chicago, and all throughout the country and the world. Please get in touch with us, and let's talk about this. There's a headline here from a story from KQED out in San Francisco. Stop blaming Tuskegee. Critics say it's an excuse for current medical racism. And we saw this so clearly in the case of Dr. Susan Moore. Now, who is Dr. Susan Moore? Family physician, University of Michigan Medical School graduate, a black woman. She went on Facebook and she described how her white doctor was treating her and made her feel like she was a drug addict. They didn't believe her when she told them, I'm a physician. She had COVID-19. I'm a physician. And she went through the protocols. What are you giving me? And it was very clear after they listened to her for quite some time, took them a long time to believe her now, that they finally believed her. They finally believed her. But he did not even listen to her lungs, she said. She said he wouldn't touch her in any way. And he suggested that whilst he was being hospitalized for COVID-19, that she go home. Sound familiar, anybody? Well, guess what? 52 years of age, 3 weeks later, dead. Now, this happened in real time while we're in a pandemic. 12.2% of black children are offered opioids for appendicitis compared to 33.9% of white children. In the 1840s, when J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, operated on enslaved women against their will, he did it without anesthesia. And then once he'd find out whether the process worked, he would anesthetize white women. So there's a lot going on here. And I'm going to get on the other side just before we get out of this particular segment. We're going to talk, you're going to give us a quick clinic, Dr. Deborah Holden, on what we should do, how we should mask up, be physically distanced, and all of that. But let's get right to this topic because people have made a great deal about so-called vaccine hesitancy in the Black community, but now it's coming out that the most people who resist, if you will, this COVID-19, uh, this vaccine, really they're white, they're Republican. Now, mind you, there is a lot of resistance, not just hesitancy, but resistance in the Black and brown communities. But they're different reasons. They're different reasons. Think of Dr. Susan Moore. Think of your experience going to get tested for COVID-19, and early on in the pandemic, Black people could not get the test, and you would get sent home from the hospital too. Wow, from the emergency room. It's a lot going on here. Dr. Ivan Walks, uh, former DC Public Health Commissioner, we're so excited that you're with us as the movement is moving forward to try and get you some statehood. I would love that. And of course, staying with us is our own Dr. Deborah Holden, world-renowned epidemiologist. Um, Let me, since you're new to this segment, Dr. Walks, what do you make of Dr. Susan Moore? What do you make of people who are saying that, wait a minute, we have got enduring racism? Black and brown people are treated very different, and Black people in particular. We're not treated with the care. We're not given the pain medicine. Even our children, when they're in pain, appendicitis, you don't give these
Yeah.
children medicine for appendicitis. Let me first establish: is appendicitis painful?
Uh, that's the first sign that you have appendicitis. Typically, is that you have pain.
Oh, okay.
So yes.
Oh, okay. I wanted to be sure. I'm not a physician.
No,
So
no. This is such an important topic. I can't tell you how many times I've been a doctor many decades, and I can't tell you how many times I've personally gone in for some sort of medical care, and I hear these words. Well, why didn't you let us know you were a doctor? And my response is always one of, it's just the old thing, I looked next to me and there I was beside myself. Just so angry because why would that make a difference? And with Dr. Susan Moore, it's horrible that they didn't believe she was a doctor, but why would it matter? Why should it matter? Most of us are not physicians and we should be treated equitably. So the bottom line about this is that even when you are a doctor, and Dr. Susan Moore's story is so heart-wrenching, this is still a problem for us. We need to recognize that it goes back to the fact that we're not seen. What is it? 3/5 of a human, whatever the term is that is used, it's not over. And I'm so happy to be on your show and to be with you and with Dr. Deborah, because this is something that people want to, we had a Black president, it must be over. No, it's not over. We are still not viewed the same. We're still dehumanized, and it comes out in how people, and it isn't like these are bad people who are trying to hurt us. It's that they're raised in this culture of thinking of us as separate and thinking of us as unequal and thinking of us as different. Doesn't matter how many interracial relationships and interracial children we have, they're still going to be Black and they're still going to be treated in this way. I'll give you a personal story. When I was health officer in D.C., we had the anthrax attacks. The people that died in the anthrax attacks in D.C. were Black. The people who survived in the anthrax attacks in D.C., in the D.C. area, were not Black. And one of the Black people that died went to the hospital, and you know the rest of the story, was sent home. This is what happens. It's typical, it's ordinary. So rather than celebrate the problem exclusively, I just think it's important for us to be able to we make sure we know who our doctor is, make sure we know what medications we're getting, make sure we document what we're asking for. Don't just say it, write it down. Write down your questions on your way to the doctor to make sure because when you're in pain, you're not going to remember everything you're supposed to say. You're just not going to. Pain gets your attention and everything else doesn't. So I think it's important for us to understand that this goes back to the dehumanizing of us, It's not that these are evil people. It's that we have to start very early re-educating children. Those children will become doctors and nurses and pharmacists and all the other people in our healthcare sphere. And we have to begin to put this kind of education in our training programs for doctors and nurses. They need to understand about implicit bias. They need to understand, they need to read the book Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. They need to understand the history of this, and they need to understand the current stories of people who are still dying unequitably and needlessly because of this kind of disregard for us. I mean, we're crying out loud. We're people. Just treat us like you treat other people. We're not asking for special privileges. We're asking to be treated like regular people.
You know, Dr. Reuben Warren, I think that's it. But we're not treated that way. Dr. Deborah Verholden, Dr. Reuben Warren, who's the director of the National Center for Bioethics and Research and Healthcare at Tuskegee University today. Uh, he asserts that we're not even asked to participate in the trials, in the studies. He said, and that became a source of contention within um, with your colleagues, because these are your and Dr. Walk's colleagues. This became a source of contention. He said, wait. You all haven't even asked these people. Is there a trust factor, Dr. Verholden? Yes. He said, but if asked, and if we see that this is for the greater good, Black people, brown people will participate in these studies, but you're not even being asked. Your response to that?
Well, I think the whole narrative about Tuskegee, especially in the face of COVID, what a lot of people don't realize is what that really did is further a very racist narrative that Black people won't get over old stuff. When in fact, and I've been saying this since the Tuskegee thing came up, I said, stop telling that lie. My good colleague and mentor, or actual colleague, somebody I actually work with, Tom Levis, did a study that predated COVID, and the majority of Black people did not know what Tuskegee was, let alone understand the inner workings of it, or had it as something that was fueling their choices around health and healthcare. But that notion, that conversation that Tuskegee is somehow this thing that we won't get past, very much furthers a very racist narrative that isn't true. And then lets people off the hook for understanding there are real modern day wrongdoings that we deal with in the healthcare system that sully our experience and have us not want to participate. And it's not the egregious things of like what happened with Tuskegee. It's a lot more subtle and simple and enduring and chronic than that. It's the experience of Dr. Moore of being disrespected. It's the experience of being devalued, of being dehumanized, of being belittled, of having to sit in a weight room, for hours watching others, have their turn. It's things like that. And people share about those stories and they share about those experiences and they live those experiences. Not dealing with the modern day inequities in health and healthcare lets the country and the system off the hook for dealing with themselves. And instead pointing to something that happened, 30, 40 years ago makes it our problem. We're very good at victim blaming in this country. We didn't ask for Tuskegee. Those Black men didn't ask to have this treatment withheld from them or to be denied access to something that would have been, for many of them and their wives and their children, life-saving. They didn't ask for that. But it's really just tragic to me how now that's being used to fuel and further racist ideology about Black people and health and healthcare, and blaming the disparate instead of looking at what is actually real and dealing with ourselves and dealing with our system and our system of care and how racist and unfair it is. So the whole thing about Tuskegee, I've been saying this since it came out, is just not true and it's just not founded in reality. There's no data to back that up. Quite the contrary, the data point to something very different. The data point to exactly what we're talking about right now. It's what's happening right now, not what happened back then, that is fueling the problem and the mistrust.
But back then has fed into right now. But the thing is, like you said, we put everything into context and we're willing to move forward, although we should continue to carry Tuskegee and Dr. Sims and everything with us because this is, the Bible tells you not to remove the ancient landmark. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's a mistake, Dr. Walks. I mean, what
Mm.
what is it? Well, I mean, if you forget about it, then you will forget about it, and that's a mistake. So, what about this? What about us not being asked to participate in trials? We're not even given the dignity of the ask.
Well, I think that yeah, I think that there's absolutely you are going to find examples. For example, when the Pfizer study came out, one of the prominent things was, we've had this percentage of African Americans involved, we've had this percentage. So they are trying to address that. The problem is what the problem always is. It's one of inconsistency and one of inequity. Yes, I know African American physicians and PhDs who do research and do clinical research and who are involved, but it's not equitable. And so it's sort of like, pointing to the one black friend and saying, "Oh, I like black people," and you've got one black friend. There are going to be exceptions. That does not mean that where we need to be. So yes, I think sounding the cry that there are more people involved. One of my good friends, Dr. William Lawson, is a great researcher. He's a top psychiatrist. He's been chair of the psych department at Howard University. He's worked in Texas and other academic institutions. There are a lot of people who are doing research, but they don't get the same number of grants. They don't get involved at the same level in many of these studies. And so it's the inequity. It's the fact that exactly what you just said and what Dr. Deborah Forholden just said. We don't get asked. We don't get included enough.
Dr. Deborah Verholden, how do you combat this? I mean, because you and Dr. Walks you all have gone to the same schools, you've gone through the same programs, you have cleared the same bars as your white colleagues, and yet you face resistance within those circles. What do you do?
Well, so I'm probably a little bit of an outlier, probably a lot of an outlier, because I've had a very prolific career as an NIH-funded researcher. I got my first NIH R01, which is like the Cadillac of grants, before I was 30. I actually had 3 grants that all funded on the same day. And I did not realize how outlier of an experience mine was. And so we did a town hall with Francis Collins, who's the director of the National Institutes of Health. And I asked him this very question. I said, what will NIH do to level the playing field for Black and brown and minority researchers, and even better, for minority-serving institutions? And he said, well, we've got, this program and that program and that program. And I thought, we've had programs for a long time. The programs, we can't program our way out of this problem. See, I'll go back to my analogy of, if you bake a cake and you forget to put the sugar in, you can't just sprinkle it on after the fact and expect it to taste like a cake. That's what we do a lot of times with some of these programs. And I asked him a real question. I said, you can have all the programs that you want. Will you have a set aside? Will you have, and I'm going to go back to my push for mandate equity, will you have a set aside, or will you have a policy that the pool of funded investigators minimally has to mirror, with minority representation, the pool of scientists? We know how many neuroscience, researchers there are. We know how many clinical psychologists there are. We know how many basic scientists there are at doing, cancer research. We have all of this. We have the data on who applies for these grants. And NIH puts a report out every year, and every year they say, despite, all of our programs and all of our efforts, minority scientists are still less likely, all throughout the pipeline, to be funded. They're less likely to submit. When they do submit, they're less likely to get reviewed. When they're reviewed, they're less likely to get funded. You know, and so there's multiple places along the chain where we've got to address this issue of equity. And it is historical, but I want to be clear. It's not the historical events that have caused the present day events. The historical events were just a manifestation of the underlying state of things. It's the same disease, just different symptoms manifest over time. Racism is real. Racism and white superiority was baked in to our society. And it isn't even just white superiority, it's white male superiority. Remember, this country was founded for wealthy white male landholders. If you just fast forward, what that looks like today are white male business owners, white male educated. Like, there's a modern day reflection of what that underlying system is. But those past events didn't cause these current events. That past construction, things are just working the way that they were designed to work. So I am really happy to say that NIH has gone a little bit further than a program. And what they've done is they've set aside funds for minority investigators, and they've set aside funds for minority serving institutions. And I said, and we have scientists, we aren't just the people who will be doing the work around racial equity. We are the scientists who also can do work around vaccine development and cancer biology and neuroscience and all of it. Our scientists run the whole gamut, from preclinical studies to studies out in the world. And so that's the kind of things that we need to level the playing field. We need it attached to resources, and we need a bottom line for all of these agencies where they are required to ensure that minority scientists and minority serving institutions have a fair opportunity to get a seat at the table and to be the recipient of some of these resources. This was the big recommendation that came out of Healthy People 2010, was that which was done in 2000, so more than 20 years ago, was that one of the ways we can level the playing field is we need more better representation in medicine, better representation in healthcare, and we need better representation in people who are running these trials and who are running these studies. And so finally, it looks like they've got something in place to ensure that that happens. It's more than just the program.
Well, amen, and greater sensitivity. Because just because you look like us doesn't mean that you're one of us. You know, I think that you're supposed to take the experience of having been dispossessed, of having been despised, and make things better when you get there. And so we see the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Walks, who's sounding the alarm. He said, you know, Canada's got enough vaccines to vaccinate everybody twice. But the poor countries of the world, we've barely vaccinated them at all, let alone giving them access to therapeutics, Dr. Walks. I mean, because you've been the head of, you've headed up a public health department for a major city of the world. Going forward, what do we need to do?
Going forward, we need to learn comprehensively, and we need to plan comprehensively. We keep making the same mistakes. We keep acting like this is surprising and that's surprising. One of my I don't know, pet peeves, I guess, is one of the ways people say it, is that we keep being surprised that there are inequities in our community, which is where public health happens. Public health happens in the public. I mean, it sounds really simplistic to say, but I'm always amazed at how people apparently miss that when they're planning. They for example, when I was running public health in DC and we were trying to get a lot of medications out, what was planned? There was a plan that a lot of medication would be available, but as we saw here in COVID-19, it wasn't only ordering a whole bunch of vaccines, it was getting shots into arms. It's more than just having material. It's having people. It's having a way to get the people where they need to be. And so when I look at the fact that the U.S. is maybe shipping vaccines out to other countries, and there is an international effort to get vaccines to places where they need to be, I'm hopeful that people are learning from their mistakes, and people are looking at comprehensive ways of getting not just a vaccine to a location, but the needles to a location, a person to give the shot there, and then using all that we're going through right now as a way to document those resource poor areas, not only in our country, but around the world, and what can we get in place so we don't have these problems in the future? We have got to keep learning. We can't continue to make the same mistakes. And now, with our ability to gather information and to do research, what Dr. Deborah Verholden is talking about with respect to being involved at those investigative levels, there's an old saying from my managed care days: in God we trust, all others bring data. And there's something about that really insisting that people bring data and not their opinions that will allow us to use that focus that Dr. Deborah is talking about on getting the right research done. And then we have to hold people accountable. You can't tell me that you don't know when I know you know because I did the research. And it comes back to probably my number one thing, which is everything is local. We have to vote locally. We have to make sure that the people who are responsible for us locally know who we are. We have to speak to them and not wait till we have a problem, but we have to get to know them. And then we have to hold them accountable for the things that we need in our community. It may sound kind of simplistic, but it's really how our country is designed to work. So I want us to never give up, never get tired, and always be willing to have that conversation with someone when things are not critical, so they'll know who we are when we do have a problem.
Before we get to critical care, everybody, it starts with that little ping of pain. Dr. Deborah Verholden, I have 60 seconds. Your final thought.
Well, there's a lot that people can do. There's a lot that's in their hands. I encourage people to take this time and become the master of your own body and the captain of your own health destiny. Use this time for reflection. Use this time for tuning in and really listening to your body. I encourage people, eat the best diet that you can afford. Move your arms and legs every day for at least 30 minutes. Practice good sleep. And if you're feeling lonely, or even if you're not, make it a point to reach out to people and be in communication with people. If you can't do it physically, then do it by phone. Write a letter. These connections that we can form with people actually are health promoting. And please, everybody,
1 minute.
the protocols. 3 W's: wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your density, watch your distance, watch your duration. Watch where you go. Watch how many people you're around and how long you're there and how close you are to people. If you just practice these things, it won't dominate you. But these are the things that we need to do right now as we do our very best to get this community case rate down, get this vaccine widely available in the community, so we can get back to
30.
something that people enjoy better and looks closer to the thing called life that people love.
Amen.
So do your part. And yes, that's it.
No, do your part, everybody. Coming up. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Ivan Walks, former D.C. Public Health Commissioner, and Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University.
10.
Coming up, let's talk about the George Floyd trial. It is about to begin, everybody. It is about to be on and cracking. The jurors have been impaneled. What's next? Back in just a few minutes on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Walks, Dr. Verholden, you
Yes,
all
ma'am.
are the best. Oh, thank you so much. You know, I read about I went online and looked at Dr. Susan Moore's testimonies from her hospital bed last night. I just had to do it. And it just broke my heart. It broke my heart. You know, and you've heard of the Congresswoman, Terry Sewell out of Alabama. She was at Harvard Law School in between Michelle and Barack Obama, and she went to Cambridge. That's right. And she's a very dear friend of mine, and so I've known her since really college days, because she was at Princeton with Michelle Obama, former First Lady. So I've known her a long time. And and we were in New York, living in New York at the same time. She was like one of my New York running buddies, and she was at a white collar law firm, and she had to go down to Alabama one day for her family. This is before she went to Congress, and and Terry's a very upbeat, cheery kind of person. Like, oh my gosh, I mean, she really is that. And she was talking to this white woman, and her son, And, they were like, well, young lady, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a lawyer, well, where'd you go to school? I went to Princeton, I went to Harvard, then I was at Cambridge, blah, blah, da, 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 da. So she gets back to work on Monday, and her white colleague, came to her office. Now, mind you, this was like 20 years ago. And he said, Terry, I need you to sit down. I want to tell you something. I was on the plane because he was from Alabama. And they had stopped in Atlanta, as the routes do. And I had the opportunity to sit next to this woman and her son. And I had a good time, and we would talk. They asked me what I did, and he told them. He said, "Oh, you know what? Let me tell you. I heard the craziest story from this black girl. She said she went to Princeton. She's a lawyer. She went to Cambridge, and she went to Harvard Law School. And I just thought this girl she's just crazy." And he said, he described what she looked like. He said her name was Terry. She said, "Oh yeah, He said it's true."
Mm.
They did not believe her. And I'll leave you all with
Yeah.
that. Just,
Yeah.
they,
Well, I have a yeah, speechless.
wait a minute.
Speechless
They
I
don't
am.
even believe you, Dr. Walks. When you
Oh, look.
Ugh.
Walking into the United States Senate with two of my doctors who reported to me to testify before a Senate hearing, and walking in, and the person coming out to greet Dr. Walks, because I'm the one that's scheduled to testify, walks up to Dr. Siegel next to me and says, "Good morning, Dr. Walks. We are looking forward to having you with us this morning." And I'm standing there looking at Larry. Larry's looking at me, and Larry says, with the appropriate amount of disdain, "He's Dr. Walks."
Reverend Attorney Wilson's on the line.
At that very moment, Senator Hillary Clinton, who I'd known for years, walked up. "Ivan, how are you?" And it's like, come on.
It's real.
What are we doing?
Now, it's
Well, yeah.
Look, my father got tipped in the elevator at the Waldorf. Okay. He had spoken at the
Bless his heart.
Oh no, he'd spoken at the. He said I was feeling kind of good about myself. I was taking
Right.
President Mugabe and his wife to dinner at the Cosby's house, and I had just given the opening address at the United Nations that morning, and they're in the presidential towers at the Waldorf, and somehow or another, because they have an elevator operator, but he was not there. And he looked at this old white lady, bless his heart, his elder, and he said, "Ma'am, you going down?" And she said, "First floor, please." And he pushed the button. And as he was standing to get in his limousine with the president of what was Mugabe? Oh my goodness, I can't believe that's escaping me at the moment. But at any rate, they're getting in the car, and she walked over to him and pushed $1 in his hand. "Thank you. You're so nice." Love it.
The stories we have.
Come on,
Oh,
you better not get too thick about this thing. You better be clear. It applies to you, and you. How about that?
Yeah. No, it does. Well,
I love you both.
Well, listen, family, my sisters. I have a 8:00 patient waiting for me to do some doctoring. So
thank you.
It is always a joy. Always a joy. Dr. Deborah, every time I hear you, I am more impressed with your background, with your under 30, getting your, you know what? You need to just go ahead and keep being famous. Go ahead and just keep being famous.
Y'all need to make her
I love
DC.
you both.
Love
God
you.
bless you.
Y'all need to make her DC health commissioner. How about that?
Oh no, she wants a job that's a job that's doable. That's what she wants. You don't want that job. I should
help offer jobs.
Oh, Dr. Deborah,
I shouldn't have said that.
No, it's okay.
All right, love you guys.
Love
Take care.
you.
All
Love
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Everybody has every place has its problems. So it's challenging. It's challenging. Dr. Deborah Verholden, you know I love you. I'm going to send you something that I wanted you to look at. These phase 2 trials of this therapeutic from Merck. I want you to let me know your thoughts on that, because they've been very successful. So I'm sending you much love. We have attorney C.K. Hoffler and Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire.
1 minute. You have Wilson. You do not have Hoffler.
Okay, just continue to keep trying, please. Thank you so much. Okay, Deborah Furholden, we're gonna let you go. You do. Thank you. I'm gonna call you later. Okay. Is she still there? Okay. I guess she's gone. All right. Attorney, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
Great hearing your voice. You sound nice and strong this morning.
30.
All right, everybody, hold on.
$15. 10. 5.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you on Hump Day on Wednesday, March 24th. 2021. Can you believe it's spring already, everybody? Love it, love it, love it. Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text to 773-763-9278. Let's talk about the George Floyd case. Wow, Derek Chauvin's jury has been impaneled. We're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. What will that mean? And then at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking about student loan debt cancellation. What would that look like? I mean, that could happen with the stroke of a pen. If the president wanted to do it, and if you press him to, it can happen. What would that look like? How would that change people's life options? I think that at work, we're going to speak with Attorney Ashley Harrington from the Center for Responsible Lending. But first, let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to discussions about this George Floyd trial. I want to know what you think about that, everybody. Let's get to it, Paul. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 57 degrees, mostly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 43 degrees. It will be raining today. And the Dow closed down 308 points. The NASDAQ closed down 149 points. The S&P 500 held steady. Didn't move up, didn't move down. Flatlined at 0 points, everybody. Well, the gun debate is now front and center after the shootings in Boulder, Colorado. We now know that there were 10 victims of the mass shooting at the supermarket in Boulder, Colorado, where people were also getting their COVID-19 shots, everybody. We also know more about the suspect, 21-year-old Ahmad Alisa, who was taken into custody after the shooting, calling for his mother. That's who he wanted to see. He faces 10 counts of murder. But what police do not know is that why he did it. The concrete motive. They don't have that yet. In the meantime, President Biden is saying that, you know what, we don't need to wait another minute. We need Congress to pass an assault weapons ban in the wake of this killing by this 21-year-old gunman armed with an AR-15 style rifle who fatally shot these 10 people, including this husband and father of 7 children. This police officer who had just changed professions 10 years ago. He was in IT, everybody. But he wanted to protect the public. He wanted to serve the public. God bless Officer Talley and his family and all of the victims of this gunman. President Biden said, I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save lives in the future, and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. We can ban assault weapons and high capacity magazines in this country once again. I got that done when I was in the Senate. We should do it again. What do you think about that? Well, day 12, the 15th and final juror has been chosen for the Derek Chauvin murder trial. We're going to be talking about that in just a couple of minutes. What will all of that mean? Who are the jurors? What do they look like? It's very interesting. It's a mixed bag of people. The World Health Organization chief is blasting grotesque vaccine inequality in rich nations as they block the speedy end of the global pandemic, standing in the way of sharing these patents so these countries can develop the vaccines, can make them. Africa, which is 17% of the global population, for example, they have been given 2% of the vaccines globally. 2%. Mind you, Canada, to the north, they have enough vaccines to vaccinate every Canadian twice. Think about that, everybody. Nurses, teachers, and experts are pushing back against the rush to reopen schools as COVID-19 cases spike. The nation's two largest teachers' unions responded cautiously after the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced last week that as long as mask wearing continues, students in K through 12 classrooms can be just 3 feet apart, relaxing the previous 6 foot recommendation that prevented some schools from reopening. National Nurses United, they're also raising their concerns. So, what do you think about that, everybody? Do you think that it is time to send everybody back to school? We're going to have to talk about that. DC statehood. It seems like that is on the horizon. Polls are showing support for statehood at an all time high. And yes, I did answer a question on my timeline. Was Reverend Jesse Jackson a shadow senator for D.C. statehood? Absolutely, he was, right after he ran for president in 1988. It was something that he and then Mayor Marion Barry and now Delegate Norton had been pushing for decades. We do hope that it will come through now. And it's interesting. D.C. is becoming more gentrified and less black. I wonder what would happen now. There's a corporate coalition that calls on Congress to approve paid family leave. Wow, arguing that when families thrive, we all thrive. Nearly 200 companies and organizations on Tuesday, yesterday, sent out a memo to U.S. congressional leaders urging them to work with the Biden administration to include paid parental leave in its proposed $3 trillion Build Back Better recovery plan. Wow, everybody. That would be good news. On the eve of Equal Pay Day, there's a report that shows that subminimum wage workers um, suffer harassment at an extremely high level. Indeed, one fair wage, this is the concern that gave us this report, found that over 70% of women in the restaurant industry have been sexually harassed while working just once, everybody. Let's talk about it. We have got now two of the nation's leading lawyers. We've got attorney C.K. Hoffler, the chair of Rainbow Push, but she's the president of the National Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest black bar association in the world. And Reverend Jeanette Wilson, who is pastor of her own church, and she's also senior advisor to Rainbow to Reverend Jesse Jackson, and she is a lawyer in addition to being a pastor. So we're talking about this case. What does this? Now we have a panel of jurors impaneled for the Derek Chauvin trial. He, of course, has been accused of killing George Floyd. Now, we saw the videotape, attorney C.K. Hoffler. We saw his knee on his neck. We saw George Floyd calling for his mother. I can't go over it because it'll make me cry. It's too much. Um, uh, Ali Velshi, the MSNBC host and commentator, said, "What else will it take? What else do you need to see? It's the tape." Well, now we have jurors who might be able to answer that question. Um, we have a white male in his 20s. We have a multi multi-race, a mixed race woman in her 20s. That's how she describes herself. A white male in his 30s, a black male in his 30s, a white woman in her 50s, a black male in his 30s, a white woman in her 50s, black male 40s, mixed race woman 40 in the 40s, a black woman in her 60s, white woman in the 50s, and it seems like it's a mixed bag. What do you what do you when you look at this jury at this panel of jurors, what are you expecting, Attorney C.K. Hoffler? You've had so many of these trials yourself.
Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning, Reverend Wilson, and to all of your listeners. Santita, this is going to be very interesting. When I looked at and I followed the selection of jurors, and they did have a tough time. It took them about 2 weeks to get jurors, which we would expect. And I've done, just to give you a comp, this is a criminal trial. So criminal trial is different from a civil trial. What's at stake is potentially this police officer going to jail for life or some very, very significant penalty, or spending some time in jail for murder. And so when jurors are selected for a criminal trial, they are asked all kinds of questions because the stakes are very high. In a civil case, the stakes are usually money. You know, it could be a wrongful death. Like the case settled on the civil side. That's a $27 million settlement. But if it had gone to trial, they would be questioning jurors some similar issues. But it's civil. So it's for the wrongful death. No one's going to go to jail. That's very, very different because a wrongful death is a question of money. The police department paying the money, the city paying the money, the state paying the money, whoever the culpable parties would be. Here, this person's liberty is at stake. People typically, as difficult as it may seem to believe, favor police officers or law enforcement. They're more sympathetic to law enforcement. We saw and heard, and again, some of these, we don't have free access to their pictures and all that kind of stuff, but we know generally the demographics, that some of them were sympathetic to the police officer. Some of them were sympathetic to George Floyd, but listen to the narrative. Many of them thought he had a life. He had some things in his background that told a story. Now, right there, and I know previously when we talked about George Floyd in this case, we talked about how it's going to, the defense is going to shift it to the type of person that George Floyd was, which in my assessment has nothing to do with anything. What George Floyd did in his life, the people he dated, his domestic situation, the kind of father he was, when he came to that place when this police officer killed him by having his knee on his neck and preventing him from breathing, is really not relevant to me to the issues in this case. But they're going to make it relevant so that a jury, in essence, would be saying, well, maybe the police officer used excessive force, but after all, this person was a no-good nobody. This person's life, because of some mistakes he may have made, I don't know what the evidence is, because of some decisions he may have made, that should be a mitigating factor when we look at this police officer who felt he needed to restrain him, who did this. And the police officer may have done something wrong, but listen, the police officer certainly didn't intend to kill him. That's the other thing. Some of the jurors, in answering the question, said, well, they didn't think the police officer intended to kill him because it's a criminal trial, and because of the charges that that have been levied, first, second, and third degree, intent, the mens rea, the mental capacity is going to be a big component. But remember, they've added a lesser charge where intent is not going to be such a big factor. So I do think that these jurors coming in, many of them, as expected, have strong views as it relates to law enforcement. Some of them are sympathetic to law enforcement. Remember, it takes one person to hang a jury. And so some people have some strong views about George Floyd being a victim. But what I didn't see in the reporting, and again, not being there, what I didn't see in the reporting was that people felt that this was reprehensible. And I think all the people that thought were reprehensible, they got off the jury pool. And what you have to remember, when you're picking a jury, people are not going to come out and really say how they feel. You have to set it up so that and open them up to speak. And for 2 weeks, they did have the opportunity to examine these jurors. So I think they probably got who they felt uncompromised were the best jurors, but I do have concerns about this jury convicting this law enforcement officer with all of the pressure. I really do have concerns. If they are not sequestered, you have to realize that some of the women, this is the reality of jury selection. Sometimes you have women who have to go home and have to deal with their husbands when it comes to these types of things. And that's why sometimes when you're picking a jury, you do have to ask about the family dynamic. Sometimes there are women who might feel some kind of way or are victims of some type of abuse, and they feel like they wouldn't be able to justify voting to convict someone or voting to give, in a civil context, a lot of money to a plaintiff because they have a dynamic at home. That these things are real. There are other people just for religious reasons who believe that, he was probably a bad law enforcement, but we can't put him in jail. And by the way, who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for this? If who's paying for all this? Are these the taxpayers? Some people are thinking that. So jurors have a lot going on in their minds with a high-profile case like this, and when there's already been a settlement, I do think that that's playing a large part, and I'm not as optimistic that there's going to be a conviction in this case, just based on the jury composition I think we have, and this is not a slight against any group of people, our jury consultants give us advice on the types of jurors that you want. I think some of the jurors that I see here would give me some pause for a case like this. But this may be what they have in Minnesota and what they had to pick from. And they certainly got rid of any jurors that had strong feelings, I believe, one way or the other, that they shared, meaning that they were very much in favor of Black Lives Matter, because on trial is also Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. This case is trying much more than just the killing of George Floyd. It's trying political issues. It's trying the Trump administration and some of the things that the Trump administration promulgated versus the Biden administration and their positions on things. It's trying the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. All of these things are bundled up into this trial because these are the issues, whether they like it or not, subliminal or not, that these jurors will be discussing. I believe they had jury consultants. If they had jury consultants who are by and large sociologists, psychologists who are looking there and examining the psychology based on background information of the prospective jurors and giving the attorneys advice on how they should go one way or the other with a juror based on their background, their dynamics. I think the jury consultants, they are the ones who are analyzing this, and books will be written about this. I'm just not persuaded that this is the best jury. I'm just not, unfortunately.
Reverend Jeanette Wilson, I looked through the manifest of the jury pool, and I said, this is going to be interesting. You have some, presumably, you can't make the presumption, but let's just, the people who are mixed race, I think it will matter what race you're mixed with and which one with which you identify most strongly. And then you've got the $27 million, that settlement that's out there. Where do you expect all of this to go?
Good morning, Santita, and good morning, C.K. Hoffler. I think that Attorney Hoffler's analysis is just so profound, and she's actively trying cases each and every day. I think that we have a number of issues. The media has put George Floyd on trial. The case is called George Floyd's trial. It is not called Eric Chavin's trial.
Now, why is that important?
We don't even know his name. Well, because you're sending messages to the brains and hearts of jurors. The real person on trial here is George Floyd. And so when you have the $27 million settlement out there, people will think, the family's already been compensated. His life was not worth that much because you're dealing with ordinary, average Joe Blows who are now in the middle of a pandemic, struggling economically. So they see that and they say, well, that's enough. We have not looked at the image and the background yet of Derek Chauvin. They never even talk about him. It's almost like he does not exist, but George Floyd does. What kind of person was he? Well, passing a $20 bill. It's so deep that even Queen Sugar, the last episode, dealt with this case and how it impacts African Americans who are looking at this differently. So when you look at the jury pool, the jury mix of 15, it's an interesting dynamic. You have 3 black men, 1 black woman. So out of 15, only 4 are African Americans, 2 white men, 5 white women, 2 multiracial. If I'm picking a jury as a defense attorney, I'm looking for a majority of sympathetic white people who really have high regard for police and policing. And as Attorney Hoffler said, the police reform movement is on trial here. And so people are trying to figure out, they were marching to defund the police. Do we really want to defund the police? I mean, all of these thoughts are in the minds and hearts of those 15 people who have to decide whether this unknown man should be found guilty, when the fact is we're concerned about men like George Floyd. You look at him, and so as this trial proceeds, all of that is weighing heavily on the jury. The publicity for this trial has been enormous, all of the demonstrations. So now you got to figure, how did these jurors feel when they saw those protests from the night he was murdered all the way through? What do they think about the George Floyd legislation? How does that impact the decision that they have to make as to whether or not Derek Chauvin is guilty? What did Derek Chauvin ever do prior? We know more about George Floyd than we know about this police officer, and so that's the one thing. I think it is troubling to me because as an attorney, you're picking a jury that's going to be, as a defense attorney, I'm looking at a jury of the peers of my client, a jury of your peers. Are these jurors of the peer of Derek? So that's just my question. I wouldn't represent him. And then I was looking at the judge, because the person that is managing this trial is that white man sitting on the bench. He will either approve or not approve certain objections by both sides. The judge can signal to the jury his feelings about the situation. And so many have, what little I could discern, he appears to be fair. I don't know. And so both sides will have to look at how this judge administers justice. I remember the trial here in Chicago in Cook County with the young man that was wandering the streets that was killed by a police officer. And that judge just made the whole trial a circus. Laquan McDonald. Mm-hmm. He put people out of the court. I went every day. He put people out of the courtroom. He treated lawyers and even judges that were in the building as if we were defendants, if we were African American. I sit over there. You can't take notes. Don't bring any pencils. Just real foolishness. And he clearly orchestrated the trial as best he could in favor of the police officer. And so I think that we have to look at all of these factors. Jury selection is difficult, and people keep acting as though these are not real people. I look at the number of women on that jury. As Attorney Hoffler said, I'm sitting there thinking, I need to get this over with so I can go home to my children. I got to go back home to my family. You have to see
1 minute.
Because if you let them go home, they're watching television. They're discussing it with family people, family persons in the household. Well, there's a lot of pressure. Your girlfriend's calling you. Well, girl, what happened today?
Well, let me say this to you, Abby, as we go. We're going to have you all come back and continue to talk about this trial because opening arguments are next week. We're here. We've all seen the video, but it's been a year almost. So people have a lot of feelings. A lot of things have happened. We have a new president. So much has happened. So we'll be talking about this every day as we get to the trial, as we get through the trial on the Santita Jackson Show. Coming up, student loan debt cancellation, of course. Attorney C.J. Hoffler sending you much love and many blessings. Everyone check her out at 11 o'clock. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, WAOK. Ask her all the legal questions you want. It's a free consultation. And, of course, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire. Let's talk about student loan debt cancellation. What would it look like if you got your debt wiped out? What would that look like? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Thank you so much, Attorney Hoffler. And
you're welcome.
Reverend Wilson, Esquire.
Thank you. We love you, Santita.
Love you very much. Thank you so much for everything.
Yeah.
Thank you for
This is going to be tough. This is going to be a tough one. At another time, I would give an analogy with even with tobacco trials when you have findings that the tobacco companies committed fraud intentionally to dupe the public. There are still cases of the tobacco companies win. Even when you come in and the jurors have that as a judicial finding at the beginning of the case. They know this in connection with all of that, the tobacco companies can still win. So I know that you said at the beginning, Santita, what more do you need?
I can't trust my lying eyes. Wait a minute.
Nope.
I remember I was on this radio show, and I think I have a pretty firm grip on my emotions. I don't have a problem crying, but I just found myself in the middle of a sentence, mid sentence, and I just started to cry because
Yeah.
he was in my mind's eye, and
Mhm.
I saw him foaming at the mouth. Then I thought about that little girl, a 17-year-old, as a child, and the little
Yep.
girl's hand that she was holding. She had the presence of mind, this child, to pull out her phone and record the whole thing
Yep.
because of her
Yep.
life experiences at the tender age of 17. I mean, at
Yep.
17, my mother wouldn't let me go in. My parents wouldn't let me go anywhere unescorted. I mean, really. It,
Yep.
just because, I mean, wait a minute. I mean, I thought about all that just came rushing at me. And then I thought about the callousness of this man. And no one's talking about the fact that his wife left him the next day. No,
Yep.
this is not gossip. It's just true, everybody. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
and
matter. But
they work together,
it,
right? At the same
but as a
club.
juror, as a juror, you can sit there and you can see all of
Yeah,
that, and you say, well, you know what? Um, I know Kyle said he had no idea that he was dying.
I got you.
He was just merely trying to protect the owner of that store. I mean, they make up all kind of foolishness.
Right. And the
to
and
us.
the and the other thing
And they
too,
got 27 and that 27 million. They
at 27 million, what they don't understand.
I mean,
Right. What they don't understand is the value of a life. You know, you
they
can
don't care.
$100 million will not. Just as his brother said, I would give up everything to have my brother back.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't pay, but I think my mother reminded me that the victims of the Wounded Knee massacre refused to accept one dime from the American government. She reminded me of
Yep.
that, and we need to look at that because my mother said we have to start
Yeah.
making some decisions. There's some things you cannot be paid for, and that money has sat in an account, and it is now. I'm going to find out how much it's worth. But my mother always reminds me of these things. But look, I'm going to have to let you ladies go. Do we have a
Okay.
we have Attorney Harrington on, Paul?
Okay.
Yeah, I have her. We're just working out some sound
Okay,
issues.
very good.
Bye-bye.
Sending
All
you all
right.
much love because I'm moving on to this next topic.
Love you.
Love you very much. And Tony from California, I promise you I'm going to bring you up before we get to Attorney Harrington. Whew. Wow. Can I speak with her now, Paul?
Can I speak with her now?
I'm just working on some things with
Okay,
her.
no,
Just
just
one
let me
moment.
know. Thank you. And when you work, well, if you're working them out when we go back on the air, I'll go to Tony, okay? I want to go to Tony anyway. Oh boy, what a great day, everybody. Oh, okay. Okay, have we worked out the issues, Paul? I know we're about to come up.
We've got her now. We got 5 seconds.
Okay, let me bring her up. Attorney Harrington, how you doing?
How are you?
Sending you much love. Thank you so much for agreeing to be with us.
This is the Santita Jackson
I
Show.
always enjoy it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Hump Day. It's Wednesday, March 24th, 2021 on the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820 in Chicago. And AM 950 radio, my brothers and sisters to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And let's talk. GWC Injury Lawyers will allow you to text that number as well. To text to that number, 773-763-9278. And of course, you can meet the Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's right. And on my new YouTube channel, everybody, I need you to like and subscribe. Bab lead everybody over there. Kimberly Cooper. And I had Glauco from Brazil. You're all about to have a big election down there. I love it, love it, love it. I think you all might get some justice with Lula da Silva, maybe going back into office if you all get out and vote. Of course, everybody, I'm Santita Jackson. We're talking about student loan debt cancellation, but we were just talking about the George Floyd trial. And Tony from California called, Attorney Ashley Harrington from the Center for Responsible Lending. I want you to stay right there because, I'm, everybody's also looking at the Derek Chauvin trial. Thank you, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, for making that correction for us. Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Santita.
How are
It's
you?
Tony.
Hey, Tony.
And I'm good. And I have a way. This Chauvin guy. This Chauvin guy absolutely 100% did plan to do this. That it was not an accident. He didn't use excessive force, and I'll tell you how. Because after there were three of them holding him down, right?
Well, that was just
Correct.
well. I know we just saw
There was the
Officer
one.
Chauvin on his neck, but I think there were several people who were standing there.
There,
And maybe
there,
the
there
others
was
you're
three
saying
of
who
them
were
that
on
were
his
holding him
legs?
down.
Okay, right, who were on his
Yeah,
legs.
on his legs and on his back. Yes,
Right.
yes, on his legs and on his back. The other two were holding him down. Now,
Will that make a difference, you think?
the reason I say that it does make a difference is because every one of them felt the second that his body went completely limp. That he was no, I mean, he wasn't resisting anyway, but there was, the tension of him trying to breathe and him trying, when his muscles all went completely limp.
Mm-hmm.
If they held on to him, they held him down for another 2.5 minutes after somebody yelled, "Hey, he's not moving! He's not moving!" And so, and that was after he had said he couldn't breathe, over and over and over. And but all three of them held position. If any one of them was not in on it, they would have said, "Hey, get up, get up, get up, get up." They would have, flipped him over and started CPR right away.
Well, then,
Immediately.
Tony, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this because you're bringing up something very important. Do you think that they should be tried together?
Oh yes.
Okay.
They were all three complicit. They all three held him down after they felt him go limp.
Okay. So they're equally
After they felt
culpable.
either him go unconscious or his life leave his body, one of the two.
Okay.
They all felt that instant, and they all held position for another 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But even he that was kneeling on his neck knew the second that either he went unconscious or the life left his body, and instead of flipping him over and starting CPR right away because we pushed too far, or if this was a oops, they would have flipped him over and started CPR because every one of them are trained in CPR.
Okay.
And if every one of them was not on it, if every one of them was not in on it, they all three felt that second.
Well,
they all three that they were, holding him down.
Well,
And
Tony,
the second there was no more resistance. Yes.
I know. I think that look, you're bringing up some really great points, and I think that one of the points that you're bringing up is equally shared culpability, right? And the argument might be
Well, not
made that
just that, but if he's the only one on trial,
at this time, now their trials
also
are
felt
coming.
that second.
Yeah, I'm saying their trials are coming.
Right, but he also felt that second.
Right. Do you think because another
He
officer who
also,
was not physically on his body said midway through, don't you think
the one that was standing
it's
guard?
enough? Yeah. He is alleged to have said, I mean, there's a lot that's going to come out. But just very quickly, what do you think is, well, I know, you know what, let's not predict.
The minute that the witness yelled, he's not moving, the minute that the witness yelled, he's not moving,
Yes.
he still stood there and held guard. He still stood there and held guard and still going, hey, what are you guys doing?
So your
What are you
point
guys doing?
is,
Stop it.
so your point is very quickly, what?
This was premeditated, and they knew the second that either he went unconscious or his life left his body. That's period.
So they should
felt
be
the
charged
second
with
there was
murder,
no more
you're saying?
resistance to do it.
Are you saying they should be charged with murder?
Absolutely.
Okay. Tony from
Absolutely.
California.
Not only they'd be charged with murder, but that completely eliminates the excessive force or the policeman was just doing his job and George Floyd was a bad person and blah, 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 all that argument. No, that goes out the window.
Okay.
Because they're all trained in
Tony,
CPR and in life-saving techniques.
And they refused to do that. Tony from California has made some great points today on that particular case. And we're going to continue to look at the Derek Chauvin trial. It's not the George Floyd trial. Thank you, Reverend Jeanette Wilson and attorney C.K. Hoffler for making that point very clear. This George Floyd is not on trial here, but he is, right? He shouldn't be. He shouldn't be, but he is. And it seems like many of us are living on trial every day. Those people who have student loan debt, it is a problem that is choking literally the life out of Americans. People can't finish school. They can't buy houses. They're not getting married. I mean, it's just really changing our whole society as we know it. So, what would happen if the president decided to cancel all student loan debt? What would it do? What would it do to the economy? What would it do to our society? What would it do? What would it do? Ashley Harrington, this is part of your life's work. She's a senior counsel at the Center for Responsible Lending, senior policy counsel. I mean, this is like something that you are pushing for every day. Why?
Absolutely. Good morning. Absolutely. We're
Morning.
pushing on President Biden to cancel $50,000 in student debt per borrower because, as you said, it's that serious. It is a burden on people's lives. It is a burden on entire families, on entire communities, actually dragging down our entire economy. And it's disproportionately falling on borrowers of color, but Black borrowers in particular. We're struggling the most. We're the most likely to borrow. We borrow the most when we do borrow, and we struggle the most in repayment. And it's all the result of the legacy and ongoing systemic inequities and racism in this country. And so this is just the latest iteration of our failures to adequately provide wealth building opportunities, to do something about wealth and income disparities. And we see that showing up in the student debt crisis. But it's also impacting everyone. Like I said, it's our entire economy at risk. 70% of the class of 2016 had to borrow. That's across the board, across all races and ethnicities. And 85% of the Black graduates of 2016 had to borrow. So we have a real problem, and we have to do something about it. $1.7 trillion, Santita. It's unsustainable.
$1.7 trillion. Now, mind you, that's the American Rescue Package.
Right. The American Rescue Package, yeah, is slightly more than that. It's also the same amount as the tax cuts from 2017.
So, what? Just walk me down. When you said, "Well, walk me down the road here," what when you said would stimulate the economy? I mean, that you sound like Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren. That's what she said. She said, "Wait. This is going to stimulate the
I mean, she
economy." What
has
do you
some
mean by
good
that?
points.
What is what is she
Yes.
talking about? Old crazy Elizabeth, who is just
She
brilliant.
had absolutely, and she's one of the leads on the resolution in the Senate calling for President Biden to cancel $50,000 in student debt that we have supported and endorsed. It will put money into the economy because student debt is literally stopping people from doing the things you talked about. People can't buy houses, or it's taking them longer to buy houses. They can't save for retirement. They can't start businesses. People are putting off starting families. All of this matters, right? We're all affected if the housing market is not if people can't buy houses. We're all affected if people can't start businesses and grow them and then employ other folks and give jobs. We're all affected if people can't save for retirement. All of that impacts everyone. There was a study out of the Levy Economics Institute that found that canceling all student debt would put $75 to $100 billion back into the economy over 10 years. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about people who cannot move on with their lives because student debt is holding them down for decades and they're not making progress. This is money that for many folks is never going to be repaid. So we're effectively holding them back for something that we literally know they are not going to be able to repay.
So what is the point? Why? Oh, what is the pushback? I mean, because it's like keeping people in peonage, slavery. I say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like you got
Mm-hmm.
wage slaves because people are not making enough money, so you're never going to get out from under. So it
At
keeps you
all.
under the boot, and politically it impacts you. You feel powerless, and you become vulnerable to politicians. You get squeezed when you have no money. You get squeezed when
Mm-hmm.
you have been disempowered. What is this doing to America and to Americans not to have any economic freedom? Attorney Ashley
It
Harrington.
it It is, beyond the life choices. You're absolutely right. Like there is a psychological impact. There is a health impact of carrying this much debt. And we don't just have a problem with student debt. We have a problem with debt across the board. But student debt is the largest form of is like the second largest form of consumer debt after mortgage debt. So it is absolutely weighing on people's minds, and it's even more psychologically damaging and damaging to health because people are making payments and their balances aren't going down. Can you imagine?
No.
Many people are in loans that are negatively amortizing, right? So we pay every single month only to not cover our interest and watch our balances grow. There is something fundamentally wrong with that. There was another study out of Brandeis that showed for the class of 1994 and 1995, that cohort, 20 years later, 20 years, the typical Black borrower still owed 95% of their original balance, 95%, while the typical white borrower had paid off 96% of their balance. Can you imagine 20 years later, still having 95% of the original amount that you borrowed, even though you have been repaying for 20 years?
Was that a function of how much money blacks and whites are making? Or, I mean, what is happening here? Is it structural?
It's all of it.
Okay.
It's all of it. It's structural, right? It's the fact that we have less wealth to draw on when it comes time to go to college, so we have to borrow more. It is a function of the labor market discrimination and the income disparities that mean we have less money to use to pay it back and manage our repayment. But also that wealth thing just doesn't go away, right? Wealth is what we use to withstand financial setbacks. When there's a medical emergency, when there's a public health economic crisis, wealth is what people are drawing on. But if you don't have wealth, if Black families have a tenth of the wealth as white families, if Latino families have an eighth of the wealth of white families, when all of those things happen, they don't have that cushion. So that puts them in a more precarious position to manage all of these other bills, including their student loan repayments. You know, Black college graduates have less wealth on average than white high school graduates.
I'm speechless, but I shouldn't be. I mean, what does who is being advantaged by this? What structures is it? The banks? I mean, who is winning here? Who's getting the money? Because if after 20 years I still owe you 95%, somebody is making some money here, and it's not me.
It's not me, and it's really not the taxpayers, even though we get some pushback about why we should cancel the student debt. Taxpayers don't win in this system. So we created a very complicated system. We created basically a student loan industrial complex where you've got the borrowers, you've got the institutions, you've got the Department of Education, but then you've got the loan servicer, these private companies that are contracted out to help, that are supposed to help students manage their debt and keep them in active repayment and not fall behind. Then you've got, when they do fall behind and become delinquent or default, you've got debt collection companies. You've got all these folks who are invested for loans prior to 2010. Some of them they're guaranteed by the federal government because over 90% of the $1.7 trillion is federal debt. But they have private agencies who actually hold the loans, private entities. And so there's just a complicated system that we've created where it's not just the borrower and the school. It's not just the borrower and the Department of Ed. There are all these private companies involved and who have lucrative contracts with the Department of Education. And so there are folks who have an interest in what happens to that 1.7 trillion, to the 44 million who are impacted by it. And so, it's still unsustainable. It doesn't make sense. It's not helping the borrowers. It's not helping their families. It's not helping our economy. And it's not helping the Department of Education. The Department of Education is one of the largest banks in the country because of student loan portfolio. The largest banks in the country, Department of Education. And because of that, at every step, because we've let the system get so complicated, rather than streamlining it, making it easier, rather than making sure that we're most focused on borrowers, we add new repayment plans, right? We make it more complicated. We make it more complicated for borrowers, more complicated for servicers. When what we should do is let's fix the system, and we can do that as well by canceling this debt. If we cancel the debt, we're not just helping borrowers. We're not just advancing racial equity. We're setting up space and setting up opportunity to actually fix our broken system, to make it work and to make it work for more people.
We're talking with attorney Ashley Harrington. As you can hear, she is passionate, but she is informed and she is fighting every day for us to be able to cancel our student loan debt so that we can truly be free. You can't be free when you are a wage slave. You cannot be free when you are a slave to debt. You can't be. You're too vulnerable to everybody, to everything. You're not able to make your political decisions free and clear because you owe somebody. You got to stay on this job when you should be doing something else because you owe somebody. Think of this. President Barack and First Lady Obama were deep in student debt literally until he became US Senator, and they didn't clear their debt until he became president. Can you imagine? They were in their 50s.
Hmm.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I remember Mrs. Obama would say to me, look, I am working as a Harvard trained lawyer at the University of Chicago, and much, if not most of my paycheck is going to student loans and to child care.
Mhm.
Okay, I mean, they were
Yep.
barely above water, everybody. Attorney Ashley Harrington, Senior Policy Counsel at the Center for Responsible Lending. Um, what What can we do now? What can the president do?
He can cancel student debt. I think what is so unique about this problem, right, is that we're talking about federal debt. And we're also talking about unique authority that Congress has already given to the president under the Higher Education Act that he can do something about this. There are very few things in this country, huge problems like this, that a president can address on his own without Congress. But he can do this. When we say he can cancel $50,000 of student debt per borrower, we mean it. The authority is already there. He can take steps to help 44 million Americans and families. He can take steps to help our entire economy, to provide economic stimulus at a time where we need that right now more than anything, and to advance racial equity, because this is going to have a disproportionate impact on borrowers of color, Black borrowers in particular. He can do that on his own with the stroke of a pen. He can direct the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who was just confirmed, to cancel this debt. That is a tremendous opportunity that very few presidents have ever had.
Why won't he do it?
We are pushing. I think that we are just continuing to push this narrative. I know that President Biden supports student loan borrowers. He talked about cancellation on the campaign trail. He's talked about it since, but now we just have to make it happen, and we have to make it happen at the right amount. There's been talks of $10,000. That just won't cut it. We are over a year into a pandemic that has taken lives, jobs, small businesses, and our economy is never going to be the same. And so $10,000 just won't do it. Borrowers need real relief. We need balances to go down. We need people to be debt free so that they can participate in the recovery that's to come. And $50,000 would cancel the debt of 75% of federal borrowers, 95% of federal borrowers in default. So it's really just changing the narrative. I think there are a lot of folks out there who still think that when we talk about student debt, we're talking about rich kids from Harvard. We're not. That's not who we're talking about, right? There are so many low income, low wealth people struggling under the weight of student debt. They are folks who didn't complete, folks who were preyed upon by predatory for-profit colleges, right? There's so much going on. There's so many things that we have to fix in our system. So we have to start. The first step has to be debt cancellation, and we need our president to keep his promise. He promised us. He promised student debt borrowers relief. He promised that he would advance racial equity, and this is how he can do it. This is the first step of many that he can take.
We're talking with Ashley Harrington, attorney Ashley Harrington, Senior Policy Counsel at the Center for Responsible Lending. It seems to me, going to the name of the concern for which you work, that this is irresponsible, attorney Ashley Harrington, for America to allow Americans to carry this kind of debt. President Gaddafi, one of the hallmarks of his administration was no student debt. I mean, when you got married, you got $50,000. Every Libyan they had universal basic income. He said, we're one of the most oil rich countries on earth. So everyone got a stipend from the government. So you eliminated poverty, right? And wherever you wanted to go to school, the government would send you any place in the world because, and you didn't, they paid for you and paid you to go to school. And you came back home because you wanted to come back home and you helped to build the nation. Attorney Harrington, it just seems to be counterproductive, indeed destructive, to have Americans weighted down with this debt. It doesn't seem
It
like
absolutely.
America's not on a track to grow. The last 2 minutes belong to you.
That's absolutely right, and I think you know when President Johnson came up with the Higher Education Act in 1965, this wasn't his goal. It wasn't that we would be in 2021 with $1.7 trillion and 44 million people. His goal was to open up meaningful access to higher education because it was a public good, to open it up to low income, low wealth people, to Black students in particular who had long been denied full access to higher education. So that was his goal. His goal was to invest in a well-educated citizenry, that was diverse, right? And so, never did he think we would end up here where so many people are in debt for decades and can't get out of it, where they can't actually contribute to the economy, where we're not able to realize the full public good of all of these folks going to college and getting post-secondary education. That's not what he envisioned. Right. And so we are not being true to that original dream because the federal investment hasn't kept up. The state investment hasn't kept up. And that's how we end up here, where we switch so much of this on to students and families. And we switch on students and families in a society that was already inequitable. And so it wasn't his dream, but the policy choices that came later made where we are now inevitable. But there are also policy choices that we can make now that can address this. And that's what we need to be doing.
You know what? Let me bring up Carrie very quickly from Milwaukee. Carrie, I know we're about to get out of here, but you know what? I wanted you to be heard. Carrie, I got a minute. It belongs to you.
Thank you, Santita, and thank you for creating this space. And it's Terry, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, Terry. Okay, I have Carrie here, but Terry, excuse me.
It's all right. It's hard to understand over the phone. So I am in a weird position. So I work for a state university. I'm an academic advisor. I also have a lot of student loan debts. I appreciate the conversation that we're having, but I think one of the biggest things that people forget to talk about are students who were forced to take out private student loans as well, either because we maxed out. It took us a little longer than we thought to get through our degrees.
Well, hold on
and all
one
of
moment.
that stuff. And that was my situation.
I've got 30 seconds here. What's the difference? What private student loan debt? What does that do?
So private student loan debt isn't governed by the same rules as federal student loans. It's like a credit card almost, in a sense. They don't have the same federal protections that currently exist for loan borrowers. They're subject to different rules, treated differently.
Terry, hold on.
I can't.
Terry, stay right here, because you know what? Everybody, stay with me on Facebook Live on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and on YouTube. I understand there's been some buffering there today, but thank you so much for trying to work it out, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show 2 YouTube channel. But stay right here. We're going to hear Terry's story about how he's fighting private student loan debt, the lenders. Wow. Stay right here. Can you stay with me, Ashley, for a hot second, Attorney Harrington? Because I want to hear Terry's story. And you all should hear his story, too. It might be yours. Indeed, Bab Bileli had to go into bankruptcy to help remove his debt. This is not right, everybody. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Stay right here. Terry.
Yes.
I wanted you to be heard to the broader audience, but talk to me. Talk to us. We've got Attorney Harrington here with you. She's the expert. So please explain. You said you've gotten some of your monies for school. Now you're teaching in school. This is so ironic. But you had to get private loans. Explain that to me, and I need you and Attorney Harrington to work that out for me.
Sure.
So I probably am not I'm probably not in a common position, but I ended up going an 8-year route. I didn't have guidance to get me through a major, the motivation or the support. I was first in my family to go to college. So it took me 8 years to get my undergraduate degree. I got my degree from a small private Catholic college because I couldn't, for some reason, get into one of our state colleges because my math and science scores were not high enough. And so I found I was forced to go down this route of going to get my 4-year degree. Ultimately, I started with public student loans until I hit my lifetime max. And then I had to take out private loans to finish out my remaining 2 years. And each semester, each year, the tuition rate would go up and up and up. I started at an institution that was about $7,000 plus after tuition and fees. And then by the time I graduated, it was already bordering 11,000 in-state tuition at this college. And so I exhausted my Pell Grant. I exhausted all of the grant money, all of my my federal public loans. And so I had to take out private loans just to complete my degree. And so what that has done is I am currently in forbearance on my federal loans, which because the feds are granting all of those that extension and no interest and all of that, I've had to defer payment on that to focus on paying for my private loans. My private loans are subject to, and you were asking what the differences were, they don't have the same protections. I can't always request a deferral or a economic hardship deferral. Some of my loans, I found out, don't even offer that as an option. It's subject to the lender. The real big rub is I can't declare bankruptcy and just have those expunged. I have to do what's called an adverse action. I file an adverse action, which takes the loan to a separate proceeding outside of bankruptcy in order to have a judge consider whether I can get them discharged or not. And because of what's called the Brenner test, that was the law that, or the legal test that courts use to determine if someone is able to pay their loans or not, whether that's public or private, in order to have those loans discharged. To my knowledge, not many people successfully meet that test, and judges do not grant a discharge of those loans. And so I've been forced to continue paying on my loans. I'm fortunate enough that I have the means to do so, but it's a very big struggle on my budget. I'm a public servant. So as you can imagine, I don't make very much money, and a good chunk, about a third of my paycheck, goes to my private student loan debt right now. And I don't, and then that forces me to live with my my mom and my sister's family while I'm working for a state school. And so, it's a challenge. If I could, and I've been trying to advocate for the cancellation of federal loan debt, but the feds can't cancel private debt in the same way. And so I've also been advocating for the restoration of bankruptcy protections for student loan private student loan borrowers. But we don't. It seems like no one thinks about those things, and I understand why.
No, Terry.
Terry,
Because let me just say this before you enter here, Attorney Harrington, because Terry, number one, you deserve to have this wiped out. I struggled in college too. I mean, it wasn't academic, but emotionally, I wasn't in the best place. So, I mean, I was in and out, and I was on scholarships too. I was very, very blessed to be there. That having been said, I don't care how long it took you to get your degree. That doesn't matter. You don't need to give everybody that. The fact is, you hung in there, and you tried to work it out. So don't put this guilt on yourself. Don't do that. Don't diminish yourself in that way. You if it took you 20 years, my grandma got a degree at 61. Okay, so I mean, because she was working, putting people through school, and she didn't have the opportunity to go to school, and when she did, she had to get a GED and all. I mean, however, people have a lot of ways of getting there, and you know what? God took you through this path so that you could have this testimony. You're going to help somebody out here today. So, and maybe you'll be more compassionate toward your students who are struggling. I don't know. And so that's a good thing. Because maybe if you'd gone from point A to point B, you wouldn't be as compassionate a man as you are now. So don't do that to yourself. The fact is you have been jammed. But we've seen the billionaires who are on track to become trillionaires off of our suffering
Mhm.
inside of a year.
Mhm.
That's not right. And you stay right
Yeah.
there on that.
Mhm.
The banks are too big to fail and you're too small to matter. That's not right. Stay right there. I'm sorry, Ashley Harrington. When I just heard him, I just said, wait a minute. You got, I mean, and because these other people who take everybody's money are making no apologies. Ashley, Attorney Harrington, they're
Mhm.
making no, they're doing it without apology. I make this money now. You cannot even have mom and pop shops. Now you got to go to Amazon. I like Amazon, but my goodness.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what she said, Carrie. Congratulations on finishing. You're actually not alone. That is the story of so many folks because of the way our system is set up. You know, that there are so many folks who take what is now called a non-traditional path, but we actually call it today's students. Today's students are older. They take a little bit longer because it's not what higher education looked like 30 years ago. Also, you can't work your way through college anymore. So it takes longer. And if you want to graduate with less debt, then that means it's going to take you longer because you have to work more because of income and wage stagnation. So that is not on you. But I will say you're absolutely right, and we do care about private loans. There are $130 billion in outstanding private student loans right now as part of that $1.7 trillion. So we absolutely care about that. They are, in general, yes, riskier, have less consumer protections, have less repayment options than federal loans. And so we really encourage borrowers to max out their federal loans before they take on a private loan and to really look at them. We're also concerned that we're seeing a rise of some more predatory products that are private student loans, like income share agreements. There have been proposals to cancel, private student debt as well, $10,000. There was a proposal out of Financial Services Committee, Representative Dean, when there were considerations of canceling student debt in the HEROES Act, the original HEROES Act last year. There was also relief for private student loan borrowers. So we actually absolutely support you. But I think you hit on one of the differences, right? When we're talking about federal student debt, this is something the president can do. To help private student loan borrowers, we're going to need Congress to help with that, and we definitely should. That is definitely something that advocates that I work with, the coalition that we are in, we are definitely thinking about and working on and concerned about. So don't feel like you are saying this into a vacuum and that no one is thinking about it. We are, and we want to help all student borrowers, not just federal student loan borrowers. And on the bankruptcy thing, it's hard for everyone, right? It is very hard to distinguish any type of student debt in bankruptcy, both private or federal. And that's absolutely something we should fix as well for both types of loans. That we should make it easier to discharge it in bankruptcy. It shouldn't be something that you can take to the grave, which is too often what happens.
This is horrible. Terry, did that help you at all?
It makes a great deal, and I appreciate knowing that I'm not like an outlier. It's always been felt like that in conversations when I've gone to lobby my Congress people. So
let me tell you something. The greatest people in history are outliers. So don't worry about that. Be an outlier, okay? They eventually make the change. I'm so glad that Dr. King did not agree with segregation. He was an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm glad that Frederick Douglass disagreed with the social order. He was an outlier. I'm glad that Lincoln was counterculture. I'm glad Jesus was counterculture. I'm glad Abraham, Martin John. I'm glad that Buddha was an outlier. I'm glad those are the outliers. Sojourner Truth was an outlier. Shirley Chisholm was an outlier. Get it? The people who go along keep the social order, which disadvantages all of us. Be an outlier. Be an outlier, because you're going to give some compassion to your students, and you'll be more compassionate in this world. You'll be of greater use. Be an outlier.
That's exactly why I went into higher ed. I try to help my students avoid my mess. So thank you so much again for the opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sending you much love, and I hope you feel great about your path, because it does matter.
Thank you.
Okay? And I want you to continue to call me, Terry. Bless your heart.
I love your show, and I will. Thank you.
I love you too. I love you. Let me just have you answer this question, because we're both going to have to run. But Jacqueline has this question. She had to take out federal loans to help her kids go to college. These plus loans. Oh my goodness. She said, will loan forgiveness help her? Attorney Harrington.
We wanted to. We don't want to exclude any type of federal loans, and we think Parent Plus loans have to be included. Parent Plus loans are also disproportionately impacting the Black community, low income, low wealth people. So absolutely, our goal is to include those loans. We know that there are too many folks with Parent Plus loans who are struggling, and so absolutely.
Well, you know what I want you to do? I'd like to have you all come back. You know what? Bab, do me this favor, because Bab is like one of my guys here. Would you collect these questions on student loan debt so that we can have them for Attorney Harrington when she comes back? I want to have you back in a few days, Attorney Harrington, because a lot of people, this is impacting. I got a lot of questions here, and I wish I had the chance to today to get through them. But Bab, you and Lorraine collect, and Medi, you all, between the three of you, collect these, please. Get these questions so that we can have, so that they can be answered. Because Adrian Paul, I just can't help it very quickly. She said, "Can I transfer my consolidated loans with SunTrust back into a federal loan in order to take advantage of relief efforts?"
No.
Wow.
No. As of no. We again now you have a private student loan. We are pushing to get relief for private student loan borrowers, and so that is on our radar. But once you consolidate, once you refinance a federal loan into the private loan system, there's currently no way to undo that.
Well, you know what, and so please follow Bab. Everybody follow Bab, and please get your questions on student loan debt and student loan forgiveness. Your questions, your comments, get them to Bab, and Bab will get them to me, because it's something that we've got to talk about, and we need this. We need this right now. Oh, I think of the old church hymn, Lord, we need thee. Oh, Lord, we need thee. People need a break. This is not right. And I appreciate your passion. Um, I love the fact that you love people, Attorney Harrington, and that you're pushing for the most vulnerable. You're pushing for Terry, who is trying to tell us, well, I didn't finish in 4 years. Da, 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 da. I'm glad I had that experience. Look, I came out as a merit scholar of high school, one of the top school students in the country, and I struggled in college. I absolutely did, because I was in a bad space emotionally. I was. Didn't do drugs or anything, but I sure did eat. Everybody's got, but I learned a lot. I have to tell you, in my struggles, I really, really did. And I thank God for that, because it's put me here today. Everything that happens in your life, God will allow it or prevent it. And if it has been allowed to be in your life, let it be, let it be. Oh Lord, let it be. And let it make you more compassionate. Let it make you more loving. Let it make you much more understanding as a person. Let it work with you. That's how God can work through you. Whatever your belief system. Because see, I believe in God, and I don't play with that. Spirit, spiritual, I got it. No, I believe in God. Now that's where I am. But wherever you are, you know what? That's cool with me. I'm loving you, feeling that. But I'm just saying that whatever, my father would not be the same person if he had grown up in the same house with his father. He peered through the fence at his daddy. He could never stay with him because he was born out of wedlock. And he felt it every day. He was the product of an affair. So there's a whole lot that goes into that. Okay. So I can't fault my father's stepmother for that, because she was trying to hold her marriage together. There are a whole lot of pieces there. But he came out of that a very loving person, someone who sees the least of these and he wants to go bring them in. Everybody in, nobody out. That's where he is. I don't know if he would have been that same guy if he'd had another experience. If you read Diana, Princess of Wales' story, she was rejected in her own family. Would she have been the people's princess, the compassionate one? Had she been the accepted one all of her life? Probably not. Don't apologize for where you were. Explain where you were and let it make you a better person. That's what you need to do. Because nobody's perfect, honey. Everybody's been through something. And if you haven't, you're going to go through it, because that's the way life works. As John Lennon said, nobody gets out of this thing called life alive. Ashley Harrington, you're just a jewel.
Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy it. It's so much fun.
Oh, girl, look, it's fun, and I can't wait to have you back. We're going to get these questions for you because a lot of people have a lot of questions. You're going to be like the Dear Abby of student loan forgiveness.
Well, just let me know.
You think I'm kidding? I don't know. I'm going to call Vincenza, who's a gem, and we're going to do that.
Yes, she is.
Oh, she is, but you are, and I thank you for that. And I'm going to get you back on Keep Hope Alive as well. Because this is a real issue and it is hurting a lot of people. I mean, I went to college, as my mother said, where you could afford to go, where I had my scholarships. And my brothers did the same thing. Santita, Jesse, Johnny, Yusef, Jackie, and I went to school on scholarships that we earned. Okay? And this was like 30 years ago. I'm so glad that we didn't get caught up in this buzzsaw called student loan debt. I mean, this is horrible. Horrible. It's horrible. And you cannot get out from under. And that's not right. It's not right. It's not right.
It's absolutely not right. It isn't.
It's not right. It's not right. And it's designed to keep you down. That's what's even worse. That's what makes it so insidious and ugly. It's designed to keep you unfree in America. That's what it's designed to do. You're not supposed to be free. That's what they're telling you. So, yeah, I said that. Yeah, that's what it is. It's designed. It's designed. Oh, yeah, it's a design. And you need to push against that. That ought not be okay with you. So you need to join the Center for Responsible Lending in this fight. You should do that. Slavery ought not be okay. And it did not end in 1865. Okay? Ought not be okay. Ought not be okay. So, Attorney Ashley Harrington, much love to you. How can we follow you on Twitter and in social media?
You can follow me at ACH Esquire and at CRL Online.
Okay, we love you and thank you. And I'm going to be in touch with you in the next few days because dear Abby of student loan debt, we're going to have you back. You're Abby Harrington. That's okay.
Okay.
Blessings to you. Have a great day. Everybody.
You too. Thanks so much.
Oh, no,
Bye.
thank you. I hope you all got something from the show today. I'm sending you much, much love. And I pray that God's blessings will rain down upon you. And God bless you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been a joy to be with you today. Well, wait, that's right. I need every hour, I need the most gracious Lord. Thank you. No tender voice like thine can peace afford. I love you, L. Stanley Davis. Thank you that. And thank you all for everything. And just remember, we're all imperfect, but God can perfect us all. And God uses ordinary people to do the most extraordinary things. Remember that. Broken vessels, all of us. That's why when people start talking about people's faults and, their personal lives, in these struggles, unless you've hurt somebody, I don't even want to hear it. I really don't. Because it doesn't matter. Some of the most imperfect people do the most perfect things. And that's just how it is. Maybe that keeps you humble. I don't know. But everybody is coming through some pain, is coming through something. Everybody, 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 everybody. And it can make you strong. It can make you who you're supposed to be. Really. That's the way it works. So don't apologize unless you've hurt somebody. If you've hurt somebody, you need to apologize for that. And truly be sorry and then move forward. Move on. But growing up poor, growing up rich, don't apologize for it. Work with it. If you grew up rich and you grew up with some privilege, then become beneficent. Be generous. If you grew up poor and you get out of that circumstance, then you remember to be beneficent. Remember what it was like when you were over there, when you had not. When you were hungry and you fed me not. No, if you stop being hungry, remember to feed somebody. Do that. That's what we're supposed to take away from life. Be better and be the best you're supposed to be. I love everybody. I will see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Now I've got to figure out what we're going to talk about. And you all should let me know some of the stories you might want to hear about. Just send them to me. Reach out to Lorraine. Reach out to Bab. You all let me know. That's right. Meddy, reach out to her. And Carol and Michael Ann. Let them know. I love you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you.